And graduates, look, I know you can do this. See, because if Lorraine Hansberry and Richard Wright could stay hungry through their hardships and humiliations, if Dr. Martin Luther King, the namesake of your school, could sacrifice his life for our country, then I know you can show up for a tutoring session. I know you can go to some office hours. If Haidia's friends and family could survive the heartbreak and pain, if they could found organizations to honor her unfulfilled dreams, if they could inspire folks across this country to wear orange in protest to gun violence, then I know you all can live your life with the same determination and joy that Haidia lived her life.
So that was the First Lady on June 9th of this year, and it begs the question, who's Haidia? Who are these young people that got the country to wear orange? Why am I wearing this ridiculous trucker hat? All these questions will be answered in short order, but there's one other foundational question that we need to open with, which is, can the color orange help save lives? And you don't need to puzzle over that too long. The answer is yes. Hunters wear orange when they go in the woods to protect themselves and others. Orange is a symbol for the value of human life, because when you're hunting in the woods, it's okay to shoot the deer, it's okay to shoot the bird, it's okay to shoot a moose here in Maine. It is not okay to shoot another human being, because those lives are precious. So there's a real power and a symbolism to orange. The other question I guess I'd follow it up with is, can orange save the lives of non-hunters? Can orange save the lives of people who are impacted by gun violence around this country every day? I think the answer to that is yes, but we're going to interrogate that today with you all. So we, together, and with a bunch of people nationwide, painted the country orange earlier this year. And we want to talk a little bit about that. Why that matters, why did we set out to do that? I serve in a role at Everytown for Gun Safety, which is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. And I started about 16 months ago after about a decade at MTV and stepped into a role as the Director of Cultural Engagement at Everytown, using culture to fight gun violence. And when I came into this issue, there were two really pressing concerns that I noticed. One is that this issue is way too divisive. It's so divisive that it prevents any kind of conversation on the subject. People don't even want to talk about it because they're afraid of what the person across from them thinks about it, and they don't want to get into a fight. And that's a real concern that's holding us back. And there's no reason that it needs to be divisive, because we force a false choice upon people with this issue far too often, when the reality is gun violence. And I don't know that I've ever met anybody in this room, in this country, anywhere, who's in favor of gun violence. So if we agree that gun violence is a problem, we should be able to agree on things we can do to reduce it. The second really important concern that I encountered was, it's way too difficult to show your support for this issue. There is no simple way for you to demonstrate that you care about it. And if 92% of Americans are in favor of things like universal background checks and common sense solutions to save people's lives, why don't we make it easier for those people to show that support? So enter orange. And you can't tell this story without talking about June 2nd of this year, which was the first ever National Gun Violence Awareness Day. You're going to learn more about why we chose that date and the symbolism of it in just a little bit. But it was a really remarkable day, probably one of the best days of my life, and it was a big step forward in terms of thinking about hope and how we can actually make progress on this issue. And on June 2nd, all across the country, we asked people to do one very simple thing. We said, if you think there's more that we can do to reduce gun violence in America, to save lives, save American lives, we want you to wear orange on June 2nd. And so many people and things went orange. This is a story that has its roots in Chicago. You'll hear more about that. So it was really fitting that Chicago lit up orange. But it wasn't only Chicago. It was the rotunda in Providence, Rhode Island. It was the skyline of Mobile, Alabama. Not necessarily the first place you'd think that would light its skyline orange in support of National Gun Violence Awareness Day. It was band leaders like Questlove from The Roots on the Tonight Show. It was faith leaders like Reverend Al Sharpton, who dedicated his whole show to this issue in this campaign on that day. It was Oscar winners like Julianne Moore. It was pennant winners like the National League champion New York Mets, who all wore, get it, Mets fans, live it up, glory days. I'm not going to say that they won the pennant because they wore orange, but we can't say that for certain that they aren't, connected. It was top chefs like Padma. It was rock stars like Michael Stipe of REM. It was hip-hop moguls like Russell Simmons. It was the person we have to thank for Back to the Future Day earlier this week. Also, the dog with the bow tie. Like, come on. Like, it was Cosmopolitan magazine. It was Motown Records and all of its artists. It was networks that used to play music videos who turned their orange logo, turned their logo orange on June 2nd in recognition of this day and told a bunch of great stories online. It was comedians. It was members of Congress, more than 100. It was cops. It was country music stars with very famous daughters. It was Katie Couric. It was construction workers. It was mayors across the whole country, 67 mayors in total who participated in this, who combined have a population of upwards of 40 million living in their cities. And it wasn't just Rahm, it was all those folks. A lot of those people declared June 2nd Gun Violence Awareness Day in their cities, and we'll recognize that day moving forward. It was senators, and it was the President of the United States. All these people came together on this day and raised their hand and said, we're sick of this carnage. We've had enough of the senseless gun violence and deaths that plague this country, and we're ready to do something about it. All these people came together on that day to send a loud signal. But it wasn't just important people and influential people. It was Americans of all stripes all across the country, tens of thousands of them, who banded together and sent this signal. And it was people who were mourning, who were still mourning the loss of loved ones. It was people who danced to celebrate the joy of life. It was hipsters. It was whole communities who came together because they'd lost people to this issue and want to see change and demonstrated that. And it was a lot of people who'd lost family members to this, including Aaliyah's family, Tony's family. And Richard Martinez, whose son was gunned down in Isla Vista, California, going to buy a sandwich at a deli. Richard Martinez wears bracelets on his arm that have been given to him by family members who have lost children to gun violence. And he has way too many bracelets on his arm. And it was Nate and Cleo Pendleton who lost their daughter. And you're going to hear more about them in just a second. So all that happened because of these young people right here, one of which is standing across the stage from me. It was all because of those kids who said enough is enough, and we're going to do something about it. Now, the day before June 2nd, we announced a coalition of people who had banded together to lead this effort, to really send a powerful signal about this. And that group grew to 66 organizations. So this was not just an Every Town for Gun Safety thing. This was like everybody who cares about this issue, who thinks we can do more, came together. So it was 66 organizations on June 1st. On a few days before that, it was 45 organizations. And 2 weeks before that, it was 12. So in the course of 3 weeks' time, we went from 12 organizations and 3 celebrities to 66 organizations, 85 celebrities, 225 people, 225 million people worldwide engaged in this campaign on a single day. And this all starts 2.5 years before this, on January 29th of 2013.
Thank you so much, Jason. January 29th of 2013 was a very devastating day for me. It was a normal day for me at school, a lot of finals and things of that sort. But I watched as horrible realities, horrible rumors turned into really terrifying realities for me. On January 29th of 2013, a group of students from King College Prep, my high school, were caught in a shooting at a nearby park. One of the students was Hadia Pendleton. She was rushed to the hospital, and she went straight to the emergency room in critical condition. Unfortunately, she didn't last the night, and she passed away that same day. But Hadia, she was a very determined person. She was determined and passionate about caring for other people. And that determination and passion motivated a group of students about a month later from all kind of schools from across the Chicago public schools. And we had a discussion. It was a youth panel. We were fortunate enough to have famous rapper Lupe Fiasco and her mother, Cleo Pendleton, come mediate the event and ask us questions like, what is violence? What is it specifically to you? What do you think you can do in your community in order to prevent it from happening again? And these questions jogged us to take action and to research more about violence. We were all just really sad and we just really wanted to talk it out. But these questions were the reason that we decided to figure out more. On April 1st of 2013, we had a violence awareness campaign. It was youth-led, and we fasted from sunup to sundown for 4 days straight and wore orange on every single one of those days to not only bring awareness to structural violence, which was the term that we came up with or we researched in order to understand what the causes of violence were. You're gonna see a lot of these, ways that we countered these throughout the presentation, but that's what that campaign was for, and it lasted for 4 days. During that campaign, we had people wear orange throughout King, but also people in Africa. There was a school in South Africa where all of the students wore orange. It was a beautiful thing, and it was just amazing to see that so many people cared. About a month later, on June 2nd, which is very symbolic because it was Hadia's 16th birthday, we hosted a candlelight vigil with her family and a whole bunch of her friends and a lot of people from Chicago who were friends and family of people who had already died in 2013 because of gun violence. Over 100 people had already died by June 2nd in Chicago alone. It was her birthday, of the 16th birthday. On April 6th of 2014, about a year later, we partnered with an organization called Grandbaby Cakes, and they helped us to do a fundraising gala, as you can see right up here, and we raised over $10,000 with 100 people came out to support Project Orange Tree. On December 2nd, 2014, some months away, we hosted a food drive where we nearly tripled our initial goal, and we were able to take that food and give it to a food desert, which is a food desert, a place that doesn't have any access to organic foods and things of that sort. And so we were able to raise so much food to give to those people, and it helped directly relate back to structural violence. On March 8th of 2015, I met with Jason and Chris, and we were able to sit down in a little small pastry shop that's very crowded and full of college students just right up the street from Columbia. And we just talked about our passions, and we talked about some of the things that we did in the past. And it was one of the most beautiful moments for me because I noticed that there are so many other people in different realms that are passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about. And we decided on that day that we needed to do something big this year. Jason and Chris. On June 2nd of 2015, that's when it was Hadia's 18th birthday, but that was the day that we hosted a party for peace, and it was also the first annual Gun Violence Awareness Day. It was one of the most amazing events because I was able to connect with a lot of people who were in love with fighting gun violence, and that's the only thing that I could literally ask for. So it was such a beautiful thing to see so many people come out and support, and it was just awesome to see that we could get so many people excited about fighting gun violence.
Okay, so let's land the plane. So why does this matter? We got a bunch of people to put on orange clothing. Does that save lives? This really matters because of this hybrid right here. This is the most important hybrid I've ever been a part of. It matters because we now have a front door, a much bigger front door to the gun violence prevention movement. We've made it a lot easier for people to walk through that door and say, I want to get started. I'll raise my hand. So come into this group of 66 organizations that do the hard work of fighting gun violence every day all across the country. And let's put you to work, because what we need are people and money and passion and resources. We already know how to solve this problem. We just need more bodies. We need more people who care. So Orange has been a big, big development in that regard. And it's also now like a tribal thing where this color binds us all together as brothers and sisters in arms and making this country safer. Why does it matter to you guys? It isn't just about us and the issue that we're pursuing here, but if you look at this Orange case study, the power of a ripple of hope. What they started in a high school on the south side of Chicago grew to reach 225 million people worldwide and is now like an exciting new development to make real change on this issue. The importance of social proof. When people see other people caring about, supporting the same things that they care about and support, it really helps to grease the wheels and get more people involved. So the fact that you could signal this to your social network, to your community, to the world, was a big development. And everybody should consider that if they're doing social change work as well. Hybrid, we at the core are trying to address things that are policy centric, which are, the laws across the country that impact, that impact guns, and structural violence, systemic racism. These are big, big topics, but you can't just engage people in white papers and lobbying on Capitol Hill. You have to really engage them through culture and through their hearts. And so this was a big breakthrough in that regard. And the last thing is open source movement building. This would have been a tiny fraction of what it was if we just did this at Everytown for gun safety, but because we opened it up to everybody nationwide and gave everybody a role to play and a way to make it their own, it was enormous. And we're going to build on this in 2016, and we're going to paint the country orange again. And I hope that you all will join us. And thank you for this time today.